The battlefield was silent after the storm of war. Smoke rose in the air, broken machines lay scattered, and the smell of fire mixed with blood. Among the ruins, a single human soldier stood, breathing hard, holding his weapon with shaking hands. He had fought for hours against creatures much stronger than him, and now he was the last one alive from his unit. The soldier's name was Daniel, a simple man from Earth who never thought he would fight in a war among the stars. When he joined the army, he only wanted to serve and return home, but destiny had thrown him into something far bigger. Around him lay the bodies of both humans and aliens, the result of a battle that no one truly won. Daniel felt weak, his armor broken, but his spirit refused to fall. As he tried to move, strange sounds filled the air. Alien warriors in golden armor appeared, surrounding him from every side. He gripped his weapon, ready to fight again even though his strength was gone. But instead of killing him, the warriors pointed their spears and ordered him to follow. Their eyes were cold, but they did not strike. Confused, Daniel obeyed, unsure if this was the end of his life or the start of something worse. They led him through the battlefield, past burning ships and broken towers. Step by step, he felt the weight of every death he had seen. Finally, they brought him to a great palace carved in black stone and glowing with strange light. Inside the hall, the air was heavy with power, and every soldier bowed low. At the far end sat the alien queen, tall and fierce, her presence like fire. Her eyes glowed with wisdom and danger, and her voice shook the room when she spoke. "You are the human who survived when others fell," she said, her tone filled with something between anger and respect. Daniel stood straight, though his body trembled. "Yes, I am," he answered, with courage, though he knew one wrong word could mean death. The queen studied him in silence, her gaze sharp as a blade. Then she raised her hand, and the warriors stepped back, leaving him alone before her throne. "You fought with bravery," she said slowly, "and even my own warriors saw it." Daniel did not reply. He only waited, knowing that silence was safer than pride. Then came the words that shook him more than any battle. "I give you a command," the queen said, her voice echoing across the hall. "You will protect my daughter." The hall grew still, even the alien guards looked shocked. A human ordered to guard the royal princess, something that had never been done before. Daniel's mind raced. He could not understand. "Why? Me?" he finally asked, his voice low. The queen leaned forward, her eyes glowing brighter. "Because I see in you what others do not," she said. "You are weak in body, but your will is stronger than steel. My daughter will soon be hunted by enemies I cannot name, and I need a guardian who does not think like us." Her words filled him with more questions than answers. Why trust him, a human, when her own kind feared and hated his race? Daniel felt his heart pound as he tried to speak. "My queen, I am only a soldier. I cannot promise." "Silence," she cut him off, her voice like thunder. "This is not a request. It is an order." The weight of her command pressed on him like a mountain. He had fought many battles, but never had he faced a choice like this: to protect the daughter of his enemy, to guard her life even when his own people would call him traitor. Still, deep inside, a fire sparked. He remembered the fallen men and women of his unit, their sacrifice, their courage. Maybe this strange order was not a curse, but a chance to honor them. Finally, Daniel nodded, his voice steady. "I will protect her." The queen's eyes softened for a moment, almost human in their sadness. "Good," she said, "for soon you will see the truth of this war and the price of loyalty." At her signal, the doors opened, and a young figure walked into the hall. It was the princess, her head held high, her steps light but proud. She wore silver armor that shone like the stars, and her eyes burned with the same fire as her mother. When she looked at Daniel, her gaze was filled with contempt. "So this is the human who will guard me?" she said coldly. "I do not need a protector, especially not from your kind." Daniel stayed calm, though her words cut deeper than any blade. He bowed his head slightly and said, "Maybe you do not need me, but I gave my word, and I will keep it." The princess turned away, her voice sharp as ice. Then try to keep up, human, for I will not slow down for you. The queen watched them both, her eyes hiding secrets that neither could guess. In that silent moment, Daniel felt the world shift around him. He had survived the battle, but now he stepped into a storm far greater, a storm of politics, betrayal, and hidden truths. And deep inside, he knew this strange order would change his life forever. Daniel's new duty began the moment he left the Queen's throne room. 2 alien guards led him through long, dark corridors of the palace, walls glowing faint blue with strange energy. At the end of the hall stood the princess, waiting with arms crossed and eyes sharp like a blade. Her silver armor shone, but her face carried nothing but cold anger. "This is the human my mother trusts," she said, her voice loud enough for the guards to hear. "He looks weak, small, and tired. A single strike would end him." The guards lowered their heads, but Daniel stayed calm. He bowed slightly and answered, "I do not need to look strong. Princess, I only need to protect you." Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling in a mocking smile. "You cannot even protect yourself," she said, circling him slowly. "Your people lose every battle, your ships burn in our skies. Why should I trust you with my life?" Daniel stood tall, his armor cracked, his body bruised, but his spirit steady. "Because I gave my word," he said firmly, "and I will keep it no matter what it costs." The princess turned away, clearly bored. "Do what you wish, human," she said, "but do not get in my way." That night, Daniel was placed outside her chamber, standing guard in silence. The palace was alive with whispers, footsteps and shadows, the hiss of distant machines. He stayed awake, every muscle alert, every sense sharp. The alien guards looked at him with hate, whispering to each other that he did not belong. But he ignored them. His eyes fixed on the long dark corridor ahead. Hours passed and the palace grew quiet. Then, without warning, the silence broke. From the ceiling above, a shadow dropped fast, blades flashing in the faint blue light. Daniel reacted in an instant, raising his broken rifle and firing once. The shot struck true and the assassin fell, hissing in pain before vanishing into smoke. The princess rushed out of her chamber, anger in her eyes. "What is this noise? What happened?" she demanded. Daniel pointed at the scorch mark on the floor. "An assassin," he said. "They came for you." Her proud face faltered for a moment, the mask of arrogance cracking, but she quickly recovered, glaring at him. "Do not think saving me once makes you worthy," she snapped. Daniel only nodded, his voice calm. "I do not need to be worthy, princess. I only need to keep you alive." The next morning, the palace was filled with tension. The queen's enemies had grown bold, daring to strike within her walls. Rumors spread of traitors, of spies hidden even among the royal guard. The princess walked ahead through the halls, her head high, but her eyes cautious now. Daniel followed silently, his hand never far from his weapon. At the training grounds, she tested him. "If you are to protect me, then show me you can fight," she said, drawing her slender blade. Daniel hesitated, then nodded, stepping into the circle of stone. The aliens around them laughed, whispering that the human would fall quickly. The princess attacked first, her blade moving like lightning. Daniel blocked with his broken weapon, each strike shaking his arms. He could not match her speed, but he endured, blocking again and again, refusing to fall. Finally, she paused, breathing hard, her eyes surprised. "You are slower, weaker, yet you do not give up," she said quietly. Daniel lowered his weapon, sweat dripping down his face. "That is what it means to be human," he replied. "We may lose battles, but we never stop fighting." The words struck her deeper than she wanted to admit. For the first time, she looked at him without pure contempt. But before she could speak, a loud alarm rang through the palace. Red lights flashed, walls shook, and shouts echoed. Another attack, fiercer than before, had begun. Guards rushed in every direction, weapons ready. The princess reached for her blade, but Daniel stepped in front of her. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. She bristled with anger, ready to argue, but then saw the fire in his eyes. This was not weakness. It was a will she had never seen before. And so, for the first time, she stayed silent and let him lead. Together they moved through the shaking palace, smoke filling the halls. Enemies appeared, masked figures with sharp weapons moving fast in the chaos. Daniel fought with everything he had, blocking strikes, pushing the princess out of danger. Every wound cut him deeper, every breath grew harder, yet he refused to stop. At one point, 3 assassins rushed at once, but Daniel stood his ground, taking the blow on his armor and striking back. The princess watched, her eyes wide, her pride breaking with every heartbeat. This human, weak in body but unbreakable in spirit, was shielding her with his life. When the battle ended, the attackers fled, leaving broken bodies behind. The palace guards rushed to secure the halls, but it was Daniel who stood covered in blood and ash, still alive, still standing. The princess stepped closer, her voice softer now. "You risked everything for me," she said, almost in disbelief. Daniel met her eyes, his voice calm though his body trembled. "That was my promise," he said, "and I will keep it until my last breath." For the first time, she did not answer with anger or mockery. Instead, she looked at him with a strange silence, her thoughts hidden, and though she did not admit it, a seed of respect had begun to grow. A seed that would change both their lives forever. The palace had survived the attack, but shadows of fear still hung in the air. Every corner echoed with whispers. Every guard looked over their shoulder. The queen ordered tighter security, but Daniel could feel something deeper, something hidden. He knew the assassins were not acting alone. There was a bigger hand guiding them. Days passed and Daniel continued his duty, following the princess wherever she went. She still spoke to him with sharp words, but her anger carried less fire now. Behind her cold mask, Daniel noticed small changes. The way her eyes lingered when he stood to shield her, the way she no longer pushed him away when danger came close. But trust was still far away, hidden beneath years of pride. One night, while patrolling the outer walls, Daniel heard faint voices in the dark. He pressed himself against the cold stone, listening closely. 2 figures stood in the shadows, their voices low and urgent. "They are not ready yet," one said. "The queen still lives, but when the weapon is complete, she will fall," the other hissed. "And the daughter too, no heir must remain." Daniel's blood froze, his grip on his weapon tightening. A secret weapon designed to kill the queen and her daughter. It was more than a simple attack. It was a plan to erase the royal line forever. Daniel waited until the voices faded, then slipped back into the palace. He knew he had to warn the princess even if she would not believe him. The next morning he found her in the garden, training with her blade beneath tall silver trees. "Princess," he said, his voice firm, "I must speak to you." She frowned, lowering her weapon. "What now, human? Another warning? Another tale of doom?" Daniel did not flinch. "I heard your enemies. They spoke of a weapon, something powerful, meant to destroy you and your mother." She laughed coldly, though her eyes flickered with unease. "You hear whispers in the dark and call them truth? You are too simple, human, too quick to fear shadows." Daniel stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Shadows kill as easily as blades, princess, and I will not ignore what I heard." Her pride rose, but his certainty struck her. For a moment she said nothing, her eyes narrowing. Finally she turned away. "Even if it is true, what can you do?" "You are only one man," Daniel answered without hesitation. "Then I will fight alone if I must, but I will not let them take you." Later that night the palace was struck again. But this time the attack was different, more organized, more deadly. Explosions shook the walls. Fire spread through the outer halls and screams echoed. The enemy had grown bold, testing their strength before revealing the true weapon. Daniel fought through the smoke, pushing the princess behind him. The assassins came with new weapons, sharp and glowing, tearing through stone. The guards struggled, many falling in the chaos, but Daniel did not stop. He blocked one strike, then another, his body screaming in pain, but his will unbroken. At last they reached the great hall where the queen stood surrounded by her royal guard. Her eyes blazed with fury, and her voice thundered, "Cowards! You dare strike within my walls." But even her power could not stop the blast that shook the room. A new kind of weapon had been unleashed, energy tearing through shields and stone alike. The queen's guard fell, burned by the strange light. The assassins shouted, The weapon grows stronger. Soon she will fall. Daniel pulled the princess to safety, his body barely holding together. We have to move, he said, his voice raw. The princess struggled, her pride fighting her fear. No, I will not run. You will live. Daniel cut her off, his eyes fierce. For your people. For your mother. You must live. They escaped through hidden tunnels beneath the palace, every step echoing with the sound of battle above. The princess's face was pale, her fire dimmed by the truth she could no longer deny. The enemy was preparing something far worse than she had imagined, and the human, whom she once mocked, had been the only one to see it coming. At the end of the tunnel, they paused, catching their breath. The princess looked at him, her voice low. You were right, sir, she whispered. I did not believe you, and now my people suffer. Daniel shook his head, his voice calm but firm. It is not too late, princess, but we must act quickly. She stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time. Not as a weak human, not as an enemy, but as someone who carried strength in his spirit. Her pride cracked, and for the first time her voice carried no anger. Then we will act together, she said, her eyes steady. Daniel nodded, his heart heavy, but resolute. The path ahead was darker than ever, but he would not turn back. Above them, the palace shook with the sounds of war. The secret weapon was real, and its shadow had already begun to spread. And though Daniel was only one human among billions of aliens, he carried within him the one thing the enemy had never planned for, the unbreakable will of mankind. The palace still burned, smoke rising into the alien night. Soldiers rushed to rebuild defenses, but fear ran deeper than the flames. The secret weapon was real, and no wall of stone or shield of energy could hold it back for long. In the middle of this chaos, the queen summoned Daniel, her voice carrying both authority and urgency. He entered the throne hall, still bruised from battle, his armor cracked, his body aching, but his eyes were steady and his spirit unbroken. The queen sat tall on her throne, her face calm but her gaze heavy with secrets. Beside her stood the princess, silent and restless, her eyes fixed on Daniel with a strange mix of pride and doubt. You heard the whispers, the queen said, her voice low. You saw the enemy's strength with your own eyes. Daniel nodded. Yes, my queen, they plan something greater, something that can end you and your daughter both. Her eyes narrowed, glowing faintly as if fire lived inside them. And yet you did not run, she said, her tone sharp. You stayed, you fought, and you bled for my child. Daniel stood firm. I gave my word, and a human's word is his bond. The queen leaned forward slightly, studying him. There was a time, she said slowly, when I trusted your kind. Her voice grew heavy, carrying the weight of old memories. But that trust was broken long ago in blood and betrayal. The hall grew quiet. Even the guards lowered their heads as if the story itself carried pain. The queen's gaze drifted far away, her words carrying both sorrow and fire. Years ago, when humans first came to our stars, I believed they could be allies, not enemies. I saw in them a spirit, a courage I admired, and I offered peace. But peace was shattered when human leaders chose greed over honor. They struck without warning, killed my kin, and left scars that never healed. Daniel felt her words strike deep, though the war she spoke of had happened before, his birth. Still, he stood silent, knowing his defense would mean nothing against her grief. The queen's voice hardened. Since that day, I swore never to trust a human again. And yet here you stand, reminding me of a truth I once believed. And the princess shifted uncomfortably, her pride shaken. Her eyes flicked from her mother to Daniel, searching for answers she could not find. The queen turned her gaze on her daughter, her voice softer now. My child, you are the future of our people, but you are also their target. Enemies move in shadows, waiting for the moment to strike, and I cannot always shield you. Then the queen's eyes returned to Daniel, sharp as a blade. That is why I chose him, she said firmly. He is not like the others. He does not think like us, and that difference may be the key to survival. Daniel's chest tightened, the weight of her trust heavier than any weapon. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the queen raised her hand. "There is more you must know," she said, her voice trembling with something rare. "Fear. The weapon they build is not meant only for me. It is meant for the galaxy itself, a storm that will burn both human and alien alike." The princess gasped, her face pale. Daniel felt his blood run cold. "Then why not warn everyone? Why not unite the armies of your people?" he asked. The queen shook her head, her eyes dark. "Because I cannot trust my council. Many among them are already traitors, hungry for my throne." Her words struck like thunder. Enemies outside, traitors inside. The danger doubled. Daniel clenched his fists, his voice steady. "Then tell me what I must do, my queen, and I will do it." The queen stood, her tall figure casting a long shadow across the hall. "You must protect my daughter," she said again. But now her voice carried something deeper. Not only as her guard, but as something more. Her words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. "You will become part of my family, bound not just by duty but by blood and name." The hall went silent. The princess's eyes widened in shock. "What?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "You cannot mean—" "Yes," the queen interrupted, her voice final. "I demand that you take him not only as protector, but as husband." The princess stepped back as if struck, her pride boiling into anger. "Mother, he is human. He is nothing. How can you—" The queen's voice rose like thunder, shaking the hall. "You will obey, for this is not about pride. This is about survival." Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding. He had expected to guard the princess, to fight and to bleed, but never this. Never a bond deeper than war, a bond that crossed blood and race. His voice faltered, but he forced it steady. "My queen, I am honored, but I am only a soldier." The queen's eyes softened for the first time, filled with sorrow and wisdom. "And sometimes, soldier, the smallest stone shifts the greatest mountain. You may be only one man, but you will carry a burden greater than armies." The princess turned her gaze away, her chest heaving with anger and confusion. Daniel looked at her, but she would not meet his eyes. The silence between them carried more weight than any battle, a silence filled with doubt, pride, and fear. The queen stepped down from her throne, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Protect her, guide her, and one day she may see what I already see." Daniel bowed his head, his voice low but firm. "I will not fail her." Above them, thunder rolled in the alien skies as if the universe itself listened. The secret weapon grew closer to completion, and betrayal spread like poison. But in that hall, a new bond had been forged, one that would shake both human and alien worlds. The queen's words still echoed in the great hall. Her command was final, but the weight of it crushed the princess like chains. She walked away in silence, her silver armor clinking with every sharp step. Daniel followed behind, his heart heavy, his mind spinning with doubt. When they reached her chamber, the princess spun around, her eyes blazing. "How dare she?" she shouted, her voice trembling with both anger and fear. "How dare she bind me to you, a human, a soldier of dirt and weakness?" Daniel stood quietly, letting her rage pour out. "I am the daughter of a queen, heir to an empire, and now I am told to marry my protector like some helpless child," she cried. Her fists clenched, her blade rattled against her belt. She wanted to strike him, to break him, to push him away, but something inside held her back. Daniel spoke at last, his voice calm. "I did not ask for this, princess, and I do not seek to chain you. I was given an order and I will obey, not because I desire power, but because I swore to protect you." His words were simple, yet they cut deeper than she expected. Her pride told her to hate him, but her heart remembered the night he stood between her and death. She turned away, staring at the tall window where alien stars burned in the sky. "You are a curse," she whispered. "A reminder that my people are not invincible." Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady. Or maybe I am a reminder that strength is not only in blood or power, but in choice. Her eyes narrowed, her pride refusing to bend. Do not speak of choice, she snapped, when I have none. Her voice cracked, her anger breaking into sorrow. For years I trained to lead, to fight, to rise above every enemy, and now my fate is bound to you, a stranger. Silence filled the chamber, heavy as stone. Daniel looked at her, truly seeing her pain beyond the armor of arrogance. You are not helpless, princess, he said softly. You are fierce, brave, and proud, but even the strongest cannot stand alone forever. The princess's chest rose and fell, her breath sharp. She wanted to deny his words, but deep inside she knew they were true. Still, her pride would not let her admit it, so she spoke with venom instead. If you think you will ever be more than a guard in my eyes, you are a fool. Daniel bowed his head slightly, his voice low. Then let me be a fool, as long as you are alive. Her heart twisted. Though her face stayed cold, she could not understand this human, who gave loyalty without demand, who carried wounds without complaint, who faced death without fear. Her own people fought with pride, but his strength came from something else, something harder to name. That night as she tried to sleep, shadows crept once more into the palace. Assassins returned, bolder, faster, sharper. Daniel stood guard outside her chamber, his ears catching the faintest sound, the hiss of a blade sliding free, the whisper of movement. He spun around just as three masked figures leapt from the ceiling. His weapon clashed with theirs, sparks flying in the dark. The princess woke to the noise, rushing out with her blade. Stay back, Daniel shouted, blocking a strike aimed at her heart. But she refused to hide this time, fury burning in her eyes. Together they fought, her speed and his endurance clashing against the assassins. For the first time, they moved not as enemies, but as one. Her blade cut swift arcs. His strength pushed the attackers back. They covered each other's blind spots, their rhythm born of survival. When the last assassin fell, silence returned, broken only by their heavy breaths. The princess lowered her weapon, her hands trembling. She looked at Daniel, her voice unsteady. You saved me again. Daniel wiped blood from his face, his tone steady. It is what I promised. For a long moment she stared at him, her heart battling her pride. Her mind screamed to reject him, to remind herself he was human. But another voice, quieter yet stronger, whispered that he had earned her respect. She turned away quickly, hiding her face. Do not think this changes anything, she muttered, but her voice lacked the fire it once carried. The following days were a storm of conflict within her heart. Every time she looked at Daniel, she saw the man who bled for her. Every time she remembered her mother's command, she felt trapped in chains. At meals, she ignored him. At training, she mocked him. Yet in battle, she trusted him without question. It was a war not of blades, but of emotions, a war between the pride of a princess and the growing respect for a human. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the palace, she stood in the balcony, staring into the endless dark. Daniel joined, her quietly, keeping his distance. You do not sleep, he said softly. How can I? She replied, her voice low. My people expect me to be strong, yet inside I am torn apart. Daniel's eyes softened. Strength is not the absence of struggle, princess, it is living through it. Her eyes flicked toward him, searching his face. Why do you care so much? She whispered. Because life is precious, he said simply. And because your mother trusted me with the most important task of my life. Her heart stirred, though she forced herself to stay silent. She turned her gaze back to the stars, hiding her turmoil. But deep within, the walls of her pride had begun to crack. The struggle within her grew sharper each day, between duty and desire, between hatred and respect, between chains and choice. And though she fought to hide it, one truth began to rise from the storm inside her heart, that the human she once despised might be the very one she could never forget. The palace had barely begun to heal when the sky itself tore open with fire. Warning horns screamed, towers shook, and the ground split beneath marching feet. The enemy had arrived, no longer in shadows, but with armies, weapons, and the deadly secret they had built. It was the beginning of a war that would decide not only the Queen's throne, but the fate of worlds. Daniel stood on the walls beside the princess, his armor broken yet strapped tight. She wore her silver blade across her back, her eyes fierce but filled with fear she tried to hide. Below them, soldiers rushed into formation, banners rising against the red glow of burning skies, and far beyond, across the horizon, the weapon appeared. An enormous machine glowing with dark energy, pulsing like a heart of doom. The Queen's voice rang through the palace halls. "This is the hour of truth. Our enemies bring death, but we will bring fire." Her warriors roared, their voices shaking the air. But even they trembled at the sight of the weapon. It was not made by their kind alone. Daniel could see it. The design was cold, sharp, familiar. It carried the mark of human engineering, twisted and corrupted. The princess noticed his silence, her voice sharp. "You know this design?" Daniel nodded grimly. "Yes, part of it is human. Old war tech stolen from Earth, now remade into something monstrous." Her eyes widened, anger burning. "So your people gave our enemies this power?" Daniel shook his head, his voice steady. "No. My people lost it, and the wrong hands twisted it just as they twist the truth." The enemy's weapon began to hum, glowing brighter. The ground shook as beams of black fire shot into the sky, tearing through the Queen's shields. The first walls crumbled, soldiers screamed, and the battle began. Daniel pulled the princess close, his voice sharp. "Stay behind me." But she gritted her teeth, shaking her head. "No, not this time. I fight with you." Before he could argue, she leapt into the fray, her blade flashing like silver lightning. Daniel had no choice but to follow, covering her back as enemies swarmed around them. The battlefield was chaos, fire raining from the sky, steel clashing against steel. Daniel fought like a man possessed, his every move driven not by strength but by sheer will. He blocked a strike aimed for the princess's neck. He pulled her away from a collapsing tower. Again and again he threw himself into danger, his body breaking but his spirit unyielding. The princess felt something shift inside her as she fought beside him. For the first time she did not see him as weak. Every cut he took, every breath he fought for, was not weakness. It was sacrifice. And it was this sacrifice that kept her alive. In the heart of the chaos, the Queen herself appeared, leading her warriors, her voice a storm. She fought like fire given flesh, but even she could not stop the weapon. Its beams tore through defenses, ripping apart ships, burning the sky red. The Queen shouted above the noise, "The machine must be destroyed or all is lost." Daniel looked at the princess, his face pale but his eyes blazing. "Then we end it," he said. She stared at him, breathless, torn between fear and faith. "You will die," she whispered. "Then I die keeping my promise," he replied, his tone unshakable. They pushed through enemy lines side by side. Every step was blood and fire, every strike a gamble between life and death. The machine loomed above them, massive and alive with energy. Its core pulsed, glowing with the power to erase cities. Daniel reached the base, planting charges from fallen soldiers, his hands shaking. The princess covered him, her blade cutting down foes who came too close. At one moment, a warrior nearly struck her down, but Daniel threw himself into the blow, blood pouring from his side. She screamed his name, fury and terror breaking her voice. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand. "Not yet," he growled. "I will not fall yet." The charges lit, the machine shook, energy cracking through its frame. The sky split open as the weapon roared, beams flashing wildly. The Queen's army shouted in triumph, their courage renewed by the sight. But the princess's eyes were locked only on Daniel, staggering, broken, yet still holding the line. When the machine collapsed in fire, silence followed. The battlefield was covered in ash, enemies retreating into shadows. The Queen stood tall, victorious but weary, her gaze falling on her daughter and the human who still lived, barely. She saw what her daughter had seen, the will that no blade could break. The princess dropped to her knees beside Daniel, her hands trembling as she tried to stop his bleeding. "Why?" she whispered, tears she had never known falling from her eyes. "Why do you give so much for me?" Daniel looked at her, his voice weak but steady. "Because I promised. Because you matter." Her heart broke, not in weakness but in revelation. She had mocked him, hated him, fought him, yet he had given her everything without asking for anything. In that moment, choice became clear. She took his hand in hers, her voice fierce though soft. "Then hear me, human. I choose to stand with you, not because my mother demands it, but because I see your worth." The queen approached, her eyes unreadable. She looked at Daniel, broken but alive, then at her daughter, who held his hand as if it was the only truth she trusted. A slow nod came from the queen, heavy with meaning. "So it begins," she whispered, "a bond not of command, but of choice. And though the battle was won, the war was far from over, for in the ashes of the fallen weapon, new shadows stirred, watching, waiting, plotting the next strike against both alien and human alike. The battlefield lay in ruins, the air heavy with ash and smoke. Fires burned across the broken plains, the cries of the wounded mixing with the silence of the dead. The enemy's weapon was destroyed, its remains glowing faintly like the bones of some fallen beast. But though the queen's forces stood victorious, no one felt the warmth of triumph, only the chill of survival. Daniel sat on the ground, his armor shattered, blood marking every scar. The princess knelt beside him, refusing to leave, her hands pressed against his wounds. Her silver blade lay, forgotten, her pride set aside, for in that moment he was no longer just a soldier. He was her shield, her promise, her bond. "Stay awake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are not allowed to leave me." Daniel forced a weak smile, his breath shallow. "I told you, princess, I will not fall while you still need me." Her eyes filled with tears she had once sworn never to show. She gripped his hand tightly, as if her strength alone could keep him alive. The queen arrived, her presence as fierce as ever, but her face carried rare softness. She looked at her daughter, then at the human who had saved them both. "You fought beyond duty," the queen said, her voice steady but heavy. "You proved what I once believed, that humans carry fire not in their flesh, but in their spirit." Daniel bowed his head slightly, though even that movement cost him pain. "I only kept my word," he murmured. The queen nodded slowly, her eyes unreadable. "And in keeping it, you became more than soldier, more than protector. You became the bond that may save two worlds." The princess looked at her mother, her heart torn between defiance and truth. "You demanded I take him as husband for survival," she said, her voice steady. "But I no longer stand here because of your command. I stand because of my choice." Her words carried across the silent hall of survivors, sharp and clear. "I choose him not as duty but as truth." The queen's eyes widened slightly, though she hid her surprise beneath calm. She looked at her daughter and saw strength, not rebellion, but growth. And for the first time, she allowed herself to smile, faint but real. "Then so be it," she said softly. "Let this union mark a new path." The warriors around them murmured, some in shock, some in awe. A human standing as equal beside their princess was unthinkable. Yet none could deny what they had seen. Daniel, broken yet unyielding, had done what even their strongest could not. He had stood against the impossible and survived. Days passed as the palace rebuilt itself, stone by stone, hope rising slowly from the ashes. Daniel healed. Those scars covered his body like maps of battle, the princess trained by his side, their movements growing in rhythm. What was once mockery became trust. What was once disdain became bond. But peace was fragile, a glass reflection waiting to shatter. In the far distance, across the stars, eyes watched in silence. Hidden councils whispered, unseen masters planned. The destruction of the weapon was not the end. It was only the first strike of a greater storm. One night, As the twin moons shone pale above the palace, Daniel stood on the balcony, his gaze fixed on the stars. The princess joined him, her steps softer than before, her voice calm. "You look far away," she said. He nodded, his eyes hard. "Because I feel it, princess. The war is not finished, it has only begun." She stood beside him, her silver hair catching the moonlight, her eyes steady. "Then we will face it together," she said firmly. Daniel turned toward her, his expression filled with both sorrow and strength. "Together," he repeated, the word heavy with promise. In the throne hall, the queen spoke with her council, her voice sharp and commanding. "Let it be known, the bond between my daughter and the human is not weakness, it is our shield. Enemies will call it betrayal. Traitors will whisper it is madness, but I say it is the future." Her words thundered across the chamber, silencing doubt, planting seeds of both fear and respect. Beyond the palace walls, soldiers spoke of the human who stood unbroken. Children whispered tales of the man who bled for their princess. And among enemies hiding in the dark, anger grew. For every legend born gives hope, and hope is the greatest enemy of all. The princess walked the palace halls with new strength. Her pride had not vanished, but it had transformed, no longer arrogance but fire. Beside her walked Daniel, scarred but alive. Their bond was not one of chains, but of choice, forged in blood and battle. And though shadows gathered beyond the stars, though the next storm brewed unseen, the world had changed. A path once impossible now stood open. A path where human and alien could stand as one. A path born from pain, struggle, and sacrifice. As the night grew quiet, Daniel whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." The princess heard him, her eyes fierce with resolve. "Then let us be ready when the end comes," she said. Together they stood beneath the alien sky, a soldier and a princess, bound by promise, scarred by war yet unbroken. Their story was not finished. It had only begun. And in the silence of the stars, unseen eyes waited, unseen hands prepared, for the future carried both hope and terror, and the next chapter was already moving in the shadows.